South goes 1,000. We just access 700.
But it
If
is
we
not.
had bats, our bats would be up in the ceiling right here, close to the entrance, but also at the ceiling. And I say that we're at the ceiling because if you're going to look down the side of the rail there, you can see our tree bed. So if you look at our cave from the side profile, we're going to go back. And as we get closer, you guys see me really walking? Is that walking in the hallway? It's kind of what we're going to be doing here. So eventually, at the end of the tour, we're going to be on the tree bed itself, and the ceiling's going to be about this high. So, you know, you can probably touch it. Kind of cool to remember that. So we're getting there. Once we get around these things, you'll start to feel a cooler temperature. We'll get to a 55 degrees constant in the center of the cave. Put your sweaters on. Feels pretty good, especially after a little while. Any questions about what we're seeing here? All right, we're going to make our way through.
Listen, when we go walking down, there is no wind. And look at
Pretty weird, huh?
there is no running.
Good question. You like spiders? What about exoskeletons? Usually the person next to me gets that question. So, good question. I like to joke that he was like in here in a suit and tie because that's probably what they wore back then. This is 1906. You know, there wasn't an REI or anything during your week here. The only thing I can tell you about what's different is that our fence, that big railing, we actually have a big wooden door. And you can see that in our gift shop. Our postcard, there's two gentlemen, two doors down, and there's like a big, it's like a cabin almost. Like an 8-frame almost. He has a friend. He's never married. Friend? Yeah, especially living out in seclusion so you can be their thing, you know what I mean? Hey, you know, you gotta do what you gotta do in 1906. Not everyone has an open mind back then. So right here, now that we're inside the cavern, welcome to Boyden Caverns. I'm going to point out a few things here. If I miss anything that you were looking at, let me know. So we have two sources of water. I talked about street bed earlier. When we have a good snowpack this year at 20%, 2 years we were at 970%. We ran out before June. That year in 2019, we were going all summer long. Wow. You can really tell the difference. So that same water flow I'm talking about. Previous to 3,000 years ago, we had plenty of glaciers in the area. Going through our ice ages, back and forth, right, fluctuate. This cavity, this cavern itself, was filled with water. It was underneath the surface of the Kings River. You can imagine how much water has been flushing out when you have massive glaciers back behind us, right? You can see all that evidence right here. That shelving that goes across there, that big groove, that's all water. That golf ball-like texture you see, you can even see it go all the way to the ceiling. The smaller the divots there, rapid water flow. You see that close to the top of the ceiling. And then where they get bigger and wider there, slower. But still rapid nonetheless. You gotta make that to make that texture. So the second source of water coming from actually through the mountain itself. This is a marble mountain. You guys didn't know that? We're talking about that earlier. I heard me talking about it. Has plenty of cracks and crevices. So the water that's seeping through our soil, so in our soil there's plenty of carbon dioxide, the decaying plants, animal matter, waste, things like that. Plenty of carbon dioxide being released into our soil. So when that water is seeping through our soil, it's going to pick up that carbon dioxide. So it turns it into carbonic acid. When that carbonic acid then reaches the top of our mountain, see these cracks and crevices all throughout our marble. They'll fulfill themselves into here, and as they're just going in line, they drip out through the crevice, calcium carbonate, and that carbonic acid is now calcium carbonate, and we would say drips from that little crevice there. You can see the little stalactites on there. So let's just think about the first one. Drip itself down along this wall. Left trail. Every time it's leaving this trail, it's going to leave a little bit of calcite in the deposit. Next one drips, follows the same trail along that wall, drips again. Next one comes, follows the same exact trail, leaves a little more calcite. The next one comes, you want to keep going? Because I'll keep going. But we're talking millimeters a year in growth. We're not quite plural either, so we're like 1, maybe 2. If you do the math there, that's about 25 years of constant growth to get about an inch of growth. And they don't always drip. You can see every single one of these, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 along this first part here. None of them are dripping at the moment. The only one I know of currently dripping is right behind you guys. In this room, by the way, we got plenty of drips going on. The first indicator is not actually up there, it's down here. See that nice fresh white spot? That's our fresh calcite deposit. So when you see a darker discolored circular probably spot, most of the time it's going to be accompanied by a whiter spot down in the center. That's the calcite deposit. It looks straight up from there. Right there. So if this guy was continuously dripping for 25 years, you'd get an inch of growth. Continuously dripping. They're not always continuously dripping. That could dry out and come back in 10 years. Or 1,000 years. For your history buffs out here, this bridge you guys are all standing on or just crossed over. Great Depression era. FDR signed a New Deal. Put a lot of men to work. A lot of that money went to building infrastructure in our public lands. Here we are. 1930s. This railing also put into the group that put it in was the CCC, the Civilian Conservation Corps. So right previous to that, about 4 or 5 years before that, 1928, a group of prisoners were in the area. Did you pass Pancake Flat? Anyone notice that? Campground, maybe about a half mile up the road, called Pancake Flat. That was the campsite area for about 400 prisoners that were sent from Folsom State Prison. They're called the Folsom 400. They lived at that campsite and they were responsible for building the scenic byway. Wow. So, got prison labor and then CCC labor. But that was all after Mr. Boyden too. So remember that. 20 years after Mr. Boyden. Let's make our way through.
Did he die in the cabin or decide to move out? Or?
Yeah, and actually he's buried right there. I'm just kidding. Good question. He did pass away in transit, and I'm not lying about this. He's buried on the path, the trail. Somewhere off trail from Hume Lake. Somewhere out there. I can tell you that.
Maybe a long time.
So I'm going to ask you to go about right here. You can slow down for a second. I want you to start getting the castle. Upside down Disney Castle. Or Hogwarts. Or Seattle. Or if I bank my light off here and then long beat the shadow there, it's like Moscow or Mall. Let's see. Some kids in here, right? These are all kids jokes, guys. So these are stalactites. There's a C in there, stalactite. I remember it by stalactites hang tight from the ceiling down in the center of my life. You got a stalagmite. There's a G in there. I say stalagmites might trip you on the ground. Stalactites hang tight from the ceiling. That's how I remember it. If anyone's trying to remember the difference between them, there you go. So if you can scoot down a little bit more and get you guys a nice look straight onto the hanging city, or stalactite city. Stalactite city. Anyone have pancakes for breakfast this morning?
Yeah.
Did you?
We did.
Where are you staying at? Cedar Road? Or Grant Road?
Grant Road.
They got pancakes there.
Oh, well, we did. Yeah, we had.
Oh, you made, okay,
yeah,
okay,
yeah,
okay.
so.
Alright. Here's an extra stack of pancakes. Got syrup dripping down. You even got a chunk of butter melting on top right there. We call this the pancake room. It's a really massive formation, and it's formed not by dripping or receiving a drip onto it like a stalagmite. It's actually more of a flow. We call it flowstone. You can see the path of it, almost like a waterfall coming this way. Slow creeping set of water, filling in this formation, just coating itself over. When you see that nice, smoother texture, I know it's not smooth, but it's just a lot smoother than all this stuff, right? That's a really slow waterfall. You can see that right there. So this is the waterfall I'm talking about. I'm not talking about a really slow wave, literally moving this slow. I'm talking really just moisture covering itself. Because this moisture is also going to have calcite in it. So as it pours, if it had a couple more sources, it might seep down even further. You can see every single one of those strips that came from this area float this way. And really just cover this over and over again. Help lift this up. We have drapery formations. Those 2, 3, 4, 5. Ribbon formation. They're just straight. One piece of cloth, right? Look over there. You have one that's curved. You have another one that has 2 attached that's curved. Another one that's curved. This one has 2 attached. You can't see the one on the right. And then here you have one attached to another, and then that one actually has 2. Can you envision what those look like? You gave it 20,000 years ago. Thinking about it? Alright, tell me if you're right. Is that what you had in your head?
Yeah.
Pretty cool, huh?
Wow.
They're one of my favorites. This is about 20,000 years later. You can come this way now. These are both draperies. They started from about up there, and they're pretty massive. What's awesome about this is that this texture, this popcorn texture you see, even this nice fresh drip that is oozing out here in this section, all this section at one point looked like this, had spaces like this. But eventually, it's going to solidify